Thank you, Juan, and good morning. And in fact, this topic relates very well to the previous ones. It's really on how we are involved in the development, regulation, and safe use of medicines as patients. And so this report is out, and we have copies here for those who want to take a copy with you. Those who are online, you can also order a copy on the CIOMS website. You can also download an electronic version of the report. So it's a work which started 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. And it's in fact a textbook, a reference book in a discipline. When you have a textbook, it means that a milestone has been reached. It's not clear exactly when patient involvement and engagement with developers and regulators of medicine started, but probably decades ago. And now we have this report, which is really a reference and on which we hope to continue building a dialogue on how to further improve the way patients can contribute. So on the next slide, if I can get the next slide. And the space bar. Oh. Okay. So CIOMS is the Council for International Organizations of Medical Sciences. It was created by WHO and UNESCO in 1949. And probably most of the learned societies who are here are either associate or members of CIOMS. And it's really an organization to advance public health through guidance on health research. And CIOMS typically, if I can have the next, yeah. Oh, sorry. No, it's the one. That's all right. Yeah. Typically, CIOMS publishes guidances, and here you have some examples of previous work and work in progress by CIOMS in bioethics, with the biomedical science and the dilemma of human experimentation, but also the international ethical guidelines that they published. In pharmacovigilance, CIOMS was really a key actor in defining international standards on, for example, the surveillance of vaccines, but also the practical aspects in detecting signals of new side effects. And the work in progress, clinical research in resource-limited settings. There is a report from another working group at CIOMS. And so we created a working group called Working Group 11 with the ambition to publish a report on where we are and what are the recommendations for the future on the involvement of patients in the evaluation and development of medicines. Oops. If you can. No, come, no. One back. Yeah. Okay, all right. So the objective was really to discuss the benefits of involving patients in all these aspects of development and evaluation. And the group consisted in patient representatives. We try to involve patients from other world regions, regulators from different regions, industry, academia, and also international organizations, including the World Health Organization. The process was fully transparent, and all working group meeting minutes are made available on the website of CIOMS. And as said, the report is available online. If I can have the next slide. So some remarks on how we worked. There are always limits to such a work. Most of the work was based on published scientific literature. And it's true, and we all know this, patient organizations, for example, are not frequently publishing on what they do when they engage with developers or regulators. There is a lack of evidence, of published evidence, on all the situations where the development of a medicine has been influenced by the early or late input of patients. There are some testimonies, there is some gray literature that the group tried to capture, but probably not all what could have been collected could be found. The references are mostly in English language, even if we know that there were excellent studies done, for example, in Germany or in France by researchers in political science, evaluating the impact of patient involvement in terms of do we really influence or accelerate the research for new medicines. This could in this kind of groups, it cannot easily be incorporated in the work. The composition of the working group was well balanced when it started, but we saw it change with time. Us, the patients, I think we were the first to really be a bit overwhelmed by the work and the work it represented and the duration of the work. So it's a lesson for the future. If there is another working group composed for any other development, we really needed to commit and dedicate enough time to follow the work until its completion. On the next slide, you will see all the chapters that this report addresses from the introduction. It's a bit the history of patient involvement, the current landscapes with examples, often a vignette published by industry on describing the benefit they had by consulting patients early in the development of their products. Some important guiding principles, which we think are universal and could be applied in all world regions and by all those who need to engage with patients. The role of patients in advancing treatments, or role in using and promoting real-world data and evidence, on product labeling, and also 3 chapters on safety in terms of risk communication, rapid communication, or additional risk minimization measures, and also clinical practice guidelines, and special chapters on low and middle income countries, and some consideration during the pandemic. In the next slide, so this is a graph that illustrates all the points where we think patients can be involved prior to a marketing authorization. And if you click once, you see, for example, and this is where we really invite you to read this book in an active manner and to react if you think that things were not described as appropriate as they could have been. As any textbook, the day it is published, there are some comments will pop up. There won't be a revision any soon, but really we need to use this as a starting basis to encourage more discussions, more dialogues. Here, just an example where it says that on one hand, the healthcare professionals can define unmet needs, and on the other hand, that the patients can describe the needs, the unmet needs defined by the healthcare professionals. I'm sure many patient organizations could say, but we as patient groups, we can also define, and we are doing it every day, we can also define unmet needs. So it's just 2 different words here, and that can provoke a dialogue and enrich the report even more if you think that they do not describe completely the full picture. Another example are patient preferences studies, which we just discussed. And sometimes they appear, for example, here quite early in the development of medicines, but they don't appear at the stage of regulatory review. So that's another comment that could be made. It would be excellent if regulators themselves, during the evaluation of the benefit risk, could commission patient preferences studies to complete the data submitted by the companies, and maybe use the network of academics and the patient organizations to complete, for example, patient preferences studies during the 210 days of the benefit risk evaluation, which can be challenging given the time it needs to perform such a study. If you click again, this is an illustration of capturing patient evidence, patient data early in the development. It's a slide I use often. It's back to 1996 when a company organized a meeting with representatives of HIV from the US and Europe, and they showed results of a phase one, phase two study with different doses that had been used. If you can click again. And the higher the dose, the more a grade 2 side effect would become frequent, up to 30%. And yet, the maximum tolerated dose had not been reached, so the clinicians and the company opted to test an even higher dose in the phase 3 trial, and the patients completely disagree with this choice because they thought 30% of loose stools, even if grade 2, was already too high, and that would prevent many patients of taking this medicine for longer periods. And they convinced the company, which finally used a lower dose, not the highest dose as the clinicians and themselves would have preferred initially. And that's the dose that became authorized. And as patients were staying much longer on the treatment than the company had expected, and the treatment was so easier to tolerate than other products, it replaced all competitor products from the market. There was even a shortage. And for the first time, children could be treated. So an advice given to the company early in the development changed completely the role of this medicine when authorized at the dose that had been advised by the patients. On the next slide, and I will finish in a minute, we also have all the roles that patients can have post-marketing authorization, and you see the graphic is quite complete because we really discussed all the many possible roles and interactions, patients on one side, developer, regulator, and also healthcare professionals input. On the next slide, some key points in the landscape, and here to focus on point 4. These are, we think, the 4 areas for authorities, regulatory authorities, or companies which haven't yet started to engage with patients. If there are 4 topics which really can open the door to such a working relation, these are these ones: working on patient-related treatment outcomes, the participation in regulatory review, the dissemination of medicine information, and monitoring medicine safety. Nobody can criticize any regulatory agency or company for engaging patients on these aspects. And to conclude, I will pass this one. These are and I will pass this one and go to the conclusion. In short, so we think that this report is a success. It really proposes universal recommendations for the involvement of patients. It is a progress because as a reference book, it can now be used by private and public organizations who haven't yet started to engage with patients. And the broad dissemination will ensure the success of the work done and its conclusions. And it's also a hope that you will enrich it by reacting, by commenting it further, by providing other examples that you know, and maybe by publishing more case reports or scientific papers on all the excellent work that is done when engaging with patients, you and us all. And I thank you for your attention, and I pass the floor to Lembit.
Thank you, Francois. And indeed, we give the floor now to Lembit Rago. Lembit Rago is Secretary General of CIOMS, and we would like to thank him because he's connecting from South Korea. So he has made really efforts to be here. Good morning, Lembit.
Good afternoon from here, or good evening. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And of course, I'm extremely grateful to Francois to go through and walk through this our joint effort that was a wonderful result. And as Francois said, I would also say that this CIOMS report is clearly not the end of the journey, but it's an extremely important milestone and an encouragement to take the agenda forward. And it's also that not all countries are as advanced as European Union or United States, or soon coming closer Japan. Majority of the countries are much, much behind. So also encouragement to the other parts of the world. But now I'm going to something which is a bit an added value to this, because the group, when they started to work, they also said that the report should have a very good glossary. And of course, this was greeted by several very enthusiastic group members who formed a subgroup and started then to create the glossary. So first, it was the CIOMS cumulative glossary that they wanted to create after they had been looking on the issues of creating the glossary for this CIOMS patient-oriented report. But let's go to the next slide. Now, the CIOMS working group 11, they, as I said, they formed a very enthusiastic subgroup who started to deal with the glossary issues. And then they found out that, of course, we didn't have a glossary about all CIOMS working groups, which they missed because they started to see, is there something that we duplicate or have a different, so to say, definition than it has been used formally. And from that came the idea that in parallel creating glossary for the CIOMS report, which I think it has a very substantive glossary, this in parallel, there was an idea to come up with a cumulative glossary of CIOMS all the works, and it started in 2021. And for the time being, now after the Working Group 11 report was finalized, it came out the CIOMS cumulative glossary with the focus on pharmacovigilance version 2.0. And this is quite an important milestone as well, because I think we would like to use this also, and we would like to see it used as a tool, educative tool, and helping to educate all the stakeholders on the issues. So that's one of the. And then as a spin-off of this activity, as it also included some ICH definitions, then it was also coming with the idea, let's go to the next slide. So this is the picture of the CIOMS cumulative glossary. It can be downloaded from the CIOMS website. It's a free tool for everybody who would like to use it. And it shows the CIOMS recommended definitions of terms used in pharmacovigilance and related fields for international and educational purposes. And I would say that this has been extremely successful product in its own right, because for the time being, it's the most downloaded CIOMS publication. So let's go to the next one. Well, it is structured and it's always giving some explanations, because some terms are used historically in slightly different wordings, so it gives the history and always puts the most recent definition in a visible way that people could find the most recent one, even if historically some definitions have had serious different versions. And of course, there are hyperlinks. The product has also quite a number of hyperlinks, so people can easily get to the source documents, which makes the usability better. Next one. And then we created also the glossary for the Ice Age, because during the previous presentations, Ice Age was several times referred to. And it was quite a bit interesting that Ice Age didn't have a cumulative glossary, in spite of all tremendous work done in many areas. There had been discussions in Ice Age environment. I remember them, but it had never been taken to the action and finalized and making the cumulative glossary. So CIOMS then took it and we did it. So it's now also freely available resource from our website. And I'm just sitting in Ice Age meetings in South Korea. And today I had an opportunity to introduce it during the Ice Age Assembly. And it has already got tremendously positive feedback from experts and both from the regulators and from the industry. And we have also got some good feedback from academics who are working outside. So this is I think, two useful side products of this patient-oriented CIOMS report, which we would like to make awareness of, and people could use them in the best possible way, because they, as I said, they are both public goods that could be helping in educative activities and other activities that are dealing with the related topics, because it's always good to refer to how something has been defined and then decide whether you need to take something as a new definition, or you would refer to somebody who has already the definition there and ready to use. So I'm stopping here, and once again thanking Francois for the presentation, and also thanking all the patient organizations who were involved in our work. It was a real effort for them to keep the continued, activity and participation. And we also tried our best to organize public hearings, and also we did a public consultation for the document that enabled those who were not part of the process to be heard. So thank you, and I stop here.